Where do you find wisdom? Well, one place you find wisdom in the Red Book. I mention that because despite having read the Red Book in more than one version many times, every time I read it, I find new awakenings. And so I wanted to read you some passages from the Red Book today. I hope you can stand it. I'm going to read 3 different passages. I hope you find a little awakening there, and I'll have something to say about it also. So here we go. On the essential cases for questioning. I have a volume of scripture that is written without paper or ink. It does not contain a single word, yet always radiates light. What does this mean? From Chapter 3, Practice, verse 23. Founding Master said, "Who among you has discovered a scripture that can be read over and over again without end?" Most people consider only the 4 books and the 3 classics of Confucianism, or the 80,000 pages of sutras of Buddhism and the books of other religions to be scripture, but don't recognize the great scripture that's open right here and now. How regrettable it is. If people look at this world in the right spirit, there will be nothing in it that is not scripture. When you open your eyes, you'll be seeing scripture. When you listen, you'll be hearing scripture. When you speak, you will be reciting scripture. When you act, you will be applying scripture. Anytime and anywhere, the scripture will unfold without end. Generally speaking, what we call scripture explains the 2 aspects of human affairs and universal principles. Human affairs are to be analyzed in terms of right and wrong, benefit and harm, universal principles in terms of great and small, being and non-being. Hence, scripture guides us to choose the right direction in our lives and follow the way of humanity. And then in the end of that passage, therefore I ask you to first read well the living scripture of reality before reading all the numerous and prolix written scriptures. And then, from Master HyoungSan, second head Dharma master. Master said, the Buddha expounded 3 types of scriptures to be read in accordance with our spiritual capacities. First are scriptures written on paper in ink. Second is the scripture of real life displayed in all the myriad forms in the universe. The third is the formless scripture that is originally complete in our self-nature. The scripture of real life is greater than the written scripture, and the formless scripture is even more basic than the scripture of real life. He added, it is said, before a sage is born, the way lies in heaven and earth. After the birth of a sage, the way lies with the sage. After the sage passes away, the way lies in scriptures. The fortuitous and natural way of heaven and earth is the greatest scripture of all. Reading chapter 23 came to my attention after I did my talk on chapter 22 a few weeks ago about being a Dharma vending machine, and was that the best way to approach the scriptures? Best way to approach wisdom? And I want, raise some questions about that. And obviously, there's more to think about, other ways of finding wisdom. And I think why wisdom comes up in the chapter on practice is that it's also the part of the threefold practice: mind practice, inquiry into human affairs and universal principles, and mindful choice and action. So wisdom is inquiry into human affairs and universal principles. And these passages seem to say, at least if I know what they say, which is obviously I'm not sure, that in our experience in the world, there is much that we can learn and much wisdom we can gain. And it's in nature, it's in our interactions with our other beings, human beings and other beings. It's in studying the world. It's in It's everywhere and all the time. So obviously I was struck by these things and thought, this is great, this is wonderful. Then I thought, okay, I've been studying the world and human beings up until now, so I should have a great deal of wisdom, right? I've been in the world for more than 71 years. I'm a psychoanalyst and I study people intensively, so I should have a great deal of wisdom, right? In fact, most of you have been in the world for a long time too. And whether you're a psychoanalyst or anything else, if you're a person and you live with other people, you're studying people all the time. And if you're living in the world, you're studying the world all the time. You're exposed, we're experiencing the world. So you all should have a great deal of wisdom too. What do we need the Red Book for? You might say, or I might say. But this isn't about not needing the Red Book or about where you find, but it's like, so why have I not gained enormous wisdom of a Buddha by being in the world for all this time? There must be something more than just being with the world. There must be something more than just experiencing all these things. There must be more to it. And so my first answer was, well, maybe the answer is the threefold practice altogether. Mind training, inquiry, and choice and action. And that seemed like a pretty good answer. I could see that. That's why we have the practice. But then I thought, okay, that's good. But what would motivate someone to practice? Because practice is like effort. I mean, the idea of practice, you have to do something. You have to make effort. It doesn't just happen. You got to actually make effort. Why are we making this effort? Why are we here? It's not just for the pleasure of it. Even though there's a lot of joy in being here, we're not just here because it feels good, I don't think. But I think it's unquestionably true that Buddhism is about ending suffering. The Buddha didn't say all is suffering. The Buddha said there is suffering. I think there is. I mean, everywhere you look, there's suffering. So the Buddha said, I want to find an answer to that. And Master Sotaesan too. There's no contradiction there. Together they came up with similar ideas. Master Sotaesan expanded a bit on what the Buddha said, but basically to end suffering, you do this practice. And then also another thing that really helps to end suffering is to recognize grace and to practice grace. But again, it's practice. It's not that, okay, there's all is grace, great. I mean, that's it, all is grace. There's a practice involved. There's this effort, and the effort comes from wanting to end suffering, not just for ourselves, but that's probably a big thing for me as a motivation is like, why do I want to change anything? What's wrong? I mean, really, for this part of my life, there's not much wrong. There's not much I need to fix. There's not much I need to buy. There's not much I need to, things are pretty good. I mean, actually very good. Well, because despite that, they're still suffering. As Salma said, mortality is there, and it's right around the corner. I don't know if it's suffering or not, but it seems a little disturbing, and so that's suffering. And so, it's not about that we have to suffer all the time, but it's because suffering is present for all of us some of the time that we're motivated to do this practice, and that's why we practice the threefold practice, and that's why each part of it is so important, because it's only the three together that creates the possibility of ending suffering, of finding a way to true enlightenment and our true nature, which is always with us, but unfortunately seems to get obscured by living a human life. And so, we're finding we're back to something that's there for us, but we have to work for it, unfortunately. I mean, having to work for anything is unfortunate in a way, but we do. And so it seems to me that there's wisdom to be found everywhere, but we have to be looking for it. We have to be searching for it. We have to be inquiring. It isn't just, I wish it just came to us automatically. I would like that. But apparently it doesn't. I have to keep reading the Red Book. Not because I'm memorizing it, not because I want to be able to spout off about everything I know about it, but because, as I said, every time I read it again, it's like there's new little, oh, look at that. I mean, like these 3 passages. It's like, wow. I read 23 and I remembered that case for questioning. I thought, wow, this is about the answer to that question. And here it is. And then I happen to be reading, because that's where I am in the book right now, for the nth number of time in Master HyoungSan, and right there was that. It's like, oh, the relationship between our written scriptures, the world, learning about the world and being educated by the world, and then the wisdom of a sage. And how is this all connected? And so I wanted to offer it to you. I didn't know if it struck you the way it struck me, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to at least hear about it. So thank you for listening, and I hope it was of some value. And